Today we will examine the life of T. E. Lawrence, one of the most overlooked leaders of the 21st century. Thomas Edward Lawrence was born August 16, 1888, in Tremadog, Carnarvonshire, Wales. Throughout his life, Lawrence was fascinated by Arabia. He had the opportunity to explore it throughout college. As a result, he secured a position as an archaeologist in what is presently Saudi Arabia. While working there, the Great War began. Funding for his dig decreased greatly, diminishing his time there by 2 years. Instead of continuing his dig, he decided to enlist in the British Army. Luckily, his vast knowledge of the Middle East allowed him to return, once again, to the Holy Land. While Lawrence did enlist, he wasn't fighting. He was just doing mindless paperwork. As the next 2 years dragged on, the war just got worse. France was taken over, and the British needed an ally. Thus, Lawrence was sent to Arabia with Prince Faisal once again. There, they started planning attacks throughout Arabia. While some people know of the great Battle of Aqaba that ensued a couple months later, there were actually many much smaller battles before it. To prevent reinforcements from arriving to key towns and cities, Lawrence would set a bomb and detonate it between the Turkish trains. While some of them tried to fight back, the Arabians were far too powerful a force. After this battle, the train would be looted of everything it had. After plundering for several weeks, Aqaba became the focus of Lawrence's attention. It would become one of the astounding victories in his military career. The only good place to attempt to capture it was by sea, but the Turks had planned for this possibility and had all of their guns in the surrounding mountains pointed seabound. On the land side, however, was one of the most impassable deserts of all of the Middle East, El Haul. The reason El Haul was so difficult to cross was twofold. First, because there were no wells, which meant no water. Second, the journey was 5 days, and so the water you brought beforehand was all that was available until you reached the oasis at the end. Against all odds, Lawrence and his 40-person crew made it across the desert with only a few casualties. These were mainly due to snakes and other animals. At the end of this long journey, two major events happened. The first was that Lawrence obtained servants, Dowd and Faraj. One day, as he laid down for rest, Dowd told him that his friend was about to get whipped and begged Lawrence to talk to the encampment's leader. While he couldn't stop it, the camp leader said that he could have Faraj's punishment if Dowd would take the other half. He gladly agreed. Both would provide much happiness to Lawrence as he ventured through subsequent deserts. After getting back to camp, he realized that one person in his party had gotten lost on the way there, Qasim. This was most likely due to the fact that they had to cross a 4-day gale. While many think that the rest of the party should have noticed, author Scott Anderson offers an explanation. To endure such situations, humans tend to retreat into a kind of close-off mental state, their entire focus honed to simply trying to reach the end. Such was the case with Lawrence and Auda's party in El Haul. Surprisingly, Lawrence decided to go back to find Qasim. Even more surprisingly, he didn't tell anyone. They only found out when he went missing, then returned an hour and a half later with an almost dead Qasim. Most of the men were amazed. One of them was mad at Dowd and Faraj for not accompanying Lawrence on his quest. As a result, they were both whipped again. Afterwards, the party then continued to ride to Aqaba. Although it was arguably one of Lawrence's greatest triumphs, it wasn't prolonged. A few days before this victory, a slaughter had occurred. A group of Turkish soldiers had attacked a small encampment. Normally, they would kill some, but not all. However, in this case, they left no prisoners. No man, woman, or child survived the massacre. This event enraged the Arabs, causing them to attack a Turkish garrison, once again leaving no prisoners. The fury over the original attack fueled the Arabs' victory. After the battle, they were ecstatic. They could continue their cause with British help from this port now that they had taken over one of the largest cities in Arabia. However, Lawrence knew that the Arabians were inexperienced at defending a position, and with Turkish reinforcements on the way, they had to call in reinforcements from Britain. With their help, they eliminated the Turks. The Arabs continued to blow up nearby railroad tracks until there were none left around them. After this, Lawrence endured one of the worst experiences in his life. Lawrence and his party of 20 were venturing further and farther out to blow up the tracks. He and his second-in-command, Auda, were looking around for more targets. It was during that time when he was caught by a Turkish patrol and brought to their leader. He was then beaten mercilessly and raped. Oddly, while Lawrence did go over this in great detail, it is still highly debated among his biographers. He stated that his wrists were cracked, but he easily managed to escape out of a nearby window later. He was whipped with a stout whip, which ordinarily leaves the victim unable to move for hours. Lawrence was whipped hundreds of times and still managed to escape. After this event, he was forever changed. As a result of his torture, Lawrence returned to Britain, never wanting to return to the Middle East again. However, General Allenby, his presiding officer, urged him to return to take over Damascus. Lawrence relented and returned to the Holy Land. While Lawrence did take Damascus, he was disappointed that it was not there for the city's formal surrender. Now that the city had no government and had thousands of people, Lawrence established an Arab government. However, the French abruptly took over soon after, destroying Lawrence's vision of an independent Arabia. Once again, Lawrence returned to Britain. He already had become famous, although he despised it. He attempted to join the Royal Air Force under another name, but the press soon found him out. Unhappy, Lawrence then went to his final resting place, Clouds Hill. While he was living there, he was involved in a motorcycle accident and died 6 days later of head injuries. 1 week prior, he sent a letter to one of his only remaining friends, saying, quote, "I imagine leaves must feel like this after they have fallen from their tree." T. E. Lawrence drafted the now famous Peace Map. This suggested how to better divide up the Middle East. Many historians agree that this was a much better division of these countries than the crude Sykes-Picot Agreement that was written and put in effect during the war. We can see that he has Iraq marked. He didn't see a reason to split the Sunnis and the Shiites, however, he did separate them from the Kurds. At the time, many knew that the British were thinking about giving the Jewish people a homeland, and Lawrence knew this, so he added Palestine to his map. The plan was, however, rejected by the British administration. They weren't content with Iraq. Also, notice Sinai, Egypt, and French is where modern-day Lebanon sits. If you ask anyone to describe the Middle East, some words you might hear are desert, violence, and terrorism. But the roots of the constant battles in the Middle East are the result of one main agreement, the Sykes-Picot Agreement, which was made during World War I. Basically, it took the entirety of the Holy Land and divided it up. Here's a basic breakdown of who got what. France got Lebanon and Syria. Great Britain got Palestine, which is now Jordan, and modern-day Iraq for its rich oil reserves. The Arabs got strips of worthless desert. This imperial carve-up is the main reason of the conflicts in the Middle East today. Lawrence was a remarkable man. He had ambition, determination, fortitude, and a great intellect. To fight for his beloved Arabia, he went so far as to betray his own country. His life's work was struck down in an instant by the great powers. And so the question arises, had we listened, how much better off would the Middle East be today?